I didn't plan for it to happen. That's the lie I told myself in the beginning, the same lie I would repeat later, quietly, like a prayer that never quite reached anything holy. My husband, Daniel, had always trusted me. That was the foundation of everything we built, a calm, steady life where nothing unpredictable ever seemed to break through. He worked long hours, came home tired, and still found the energy to ask about my day. I admired that about him. I loved him for it, or at least I believed I did. Then his brother came to stay. Luca had always been the opposite of Daniel. Where Daniel was measured, Luca was impulsive. Where Daniel spoke carefully, Luca said exactly what he thought, even if it cut. He arrived with a single suitcase and a half-smile that suggested he didn't intend to stay long, but also didn't particularly care if he did. At first, it was harmless. We would sit at the kitchen table late at night, talking while Daniel slept upstairs. Luca had a way of asking questions that felt too direct, too personal, like he was peeling something back layer by layer. "Are you happy?" he asked me once, his voice quiet but steady. I laughed it off. "Of course I am." But he didn't smile back. He just looked at me like he knew I was lying. And that was the first crack. The next few days passed in a blur of small moments. Shared glances. Conversations that lingered too long. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, it was charged, like something waiting to happen. I noticed how easily he read me. How he anticipated what I would say before I said it. It made me feel seen in a way that was both comforting and deeply unsettling. Daniel didn't notice anything. Or maybe he trusted me too much to look. One evening, while Daniel worked late, Luca and I ended up sitting on the balcony. The city lights stretched endlessly below us, flickering like distant signals. "You chose the safe one," Luca said suddenly. I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," he leaned back, eyes fixed on me, "you chose someone who would never hurt you. But you didn't choose someone who would challenge you." I should have been offended. Instead, I felt something shift inside me. "Maybe I didn't want to be challenged," I said. "That's not true," he replied softly. "You're just afraid of what happens if you are." The silence that followed was different. He moved closer, not enough to touch me, but enough that I could feel the warmth of him. My breath caught, though I told myself it was nothing. Just proximity. Just tension. Just a moment. But moments, I would learn, have a way of becoming something else entirely. And when he finally reached out and brushed his fingers against mine, I didn't pull away. That was the first mistake. I didn't realize it then, but it was the moment everything began to unravel. And the worst part? A small, quiet part of me didn't want it to stop. And the worst part? A small, quiet part of me didn't want it to stop. I told myself it was nothing. A touch. An accident. A fleeting moment stretched thin by imagination. I pulled my hand back slowly, almost reluctantly, and stood up as if the movement alone could reset everything. "We should go inside," I said. Luca didn't argue. He just watched me carefully, like he was memorizing the exact way I chose to step away. That look stayed with me long after I went to bed. Daniel was already asleep, one arm draped across my side of the bed. I slipped in beside him, careful not to wake him, but the warmth of his presence felt distant. Familiar, yes. Safe, yes. But distant in a way I had never noticed before. I lay awake for hours. Because I couldn't stop thinking about how different it had felt on the balcony. The next morning, everything was normal. Too normal. Daniel kissed me goodbye before work, Luca poured coffee like nothing had changed, and the house settled into its usual rhythm. But beneath it, something had shifted, subtle, invisible, undeniable. We didn't talk about it. Not that day. Not the next. But silence, I realized, can say more than words ever could. By the third evening, it became unbearable. Daniel had gone out with colleagues, something he rarely did. I stayed home, telling myself I needed rest. Luca was in the living room, flipping through channels he wasn't really watching. I stood in the doorway longer than necessary. "You're avoiding me," he said without looking up. "I'm not." "You are." I crossed my arms. "Maybe I just don't want to complicate things." That made him look at me. "Things are already complicated," he said quietly. "You just haven't admitted it yet." I felt my pulse quicken. "You're Daniel's brother." "And you're Daniel's wife," he replied, standing now. "That doesn't erase what happened." "It didn't happen," I insisted, though my voice lacked conviction. He stepped closer. Not abruptly. Not aggressively. Just enough to close the space between us again, the same space that had felt so dangerous on the balcony. "You didn't pull away right away," he said. "Neither did you," I wanted to say. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered, "We can't do this." His expression softened, not in defeat, but in understanding. "I know," he said. And yet, neither of us moved. That was the moment I understood something I hadn't wanted to face. This wasn't an accident anymore. This was a choice. A quiet, deliberate step toward something I already knew could destroy everything. And still, when his hand found mine again, this time with intention, I didn't stop him. I didn't stop myself. Because somewhere between loyalty and desire, I had started to lose track of where one ended and the other began. And I wasn't sure I wanted to find the line again. The moment lingered longer than it should have. His hand around mine felt deliberate now, not accidental, not fleeting. There was a quiet certainty in it, like we had both crossed something invisible and couldn't pretend otherwise anymore. I pulled back first. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to breathe. "This is wrong," I said, more firmly this time. Luca didn't argue. He didn't need to. "I know," he replied, his voice low. "But that doesn't make it any less real." That word, real, stayed with me. Because it was. What I felt wasn't imagined. It wasn't some temporary distraction. It had weight. Presence. A pull that didn't disappear when I looked away. I spent the rest of the evening avoiding him. When Daniel came home, slightly tired but in a good mood, I clung to normalcy like it could save me. We ate dinner together, talked about small things, laughed in familiar ways. If there were cracks, he didn't see them. Or maybe he chose not to. That thought unsettled me more than anything else. Later that night, I stood in the kitchen alone, rinsing dishes that were already clean. My hands moved automatically, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. "You're thinking too much." His voice behind me made me freeze. I didn't turn around. "You shouldn't be here," I said quietly. "I live here right now," Luca answered. "That's not what I meant." Silence stretched between us again. Then, softer, he said, "You feel it too." It wasn't a question. I closed my eyes. "Yes," I admitted, barely above a whisper. There it was. The truth, spoken out loud for the first time. And once something like that is said, it changes everything. I turned to face him. "We stop," I said. "Now. Before it becomes something we can't fix." He studied me carefully, as if weighing whether I believed my own words. "And if it already is?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. Because deep down I knew. It already was. A week passed. We kept our distance. Conversations became polite, surface level, safe. If our hands brushed, we moved away immediately. If our eyes met, one of us looked elsewhere. It should have worked. It didn't. Because the absence of something can be louder than its presence. And the more we tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. Then, one afternoon, everything shifted again. Daniel called me unexpectedly. "I'm going out of town," he said. "Just for 2 nights. Work thing." My grip tightened on the phone. "When?" "Tomorrow morning." I swallowed. "That's sudden." "Yeah," he laughed lightly. "But it'll be quick." Quick. 2 days suddenly felt like something much longer. After I hung up, I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. Because I knew exactly what those 2 days meant. Not what they should mean. What they would mean. And the worst part wasn't fear. It was anticipation. That was when I realized something far more dangerous than anything that had happened so far. I wasn't just losing control. I had already decided not to stop. I wasn't just losing control. I had already decided not to stop. The realization didn't come with panic. It came with a strange, quiet clarity, like something inside me had finally stopped pretending. The next morning, Daniel left early. He kissed me goodbye the same way he always did, gentle, familiar, trusting. For a moment, I almost said something. Almost confessed everything before it had even fully happened. But I didn't. Take care of the house, he said lightly. I always do, I replied. The door closed behind him, and just like that, the silence felt different. He was gone. And the space he left behind didn't feel empty. It felt open. I stayed in the kitchen longer than necessary, trying to anchor myself in routine. Coffee. Dishes. Small, meaningless tasks. But every movement felt like it was leading somewhere inevitable. Luca appeared in the doorway not long after. Neither of us spoke at first. We didn't need to. 2 days, he said finally. I nodded. It sounded simple when he said it like that. Just time. Just hours stacked together. But we both knew it wasn't just that. It doesn't have to mean anything, I said, though the words felt hollow the moment they left me. He tilted his head slightly. You don't believe that. I exhaled slowly. No, I admitted. Another silence. But this one wasn't uncertain. It was charged with something that had been building for days, maybe longer. We still have a choice, I added, almost as an afterthought. Do we? He asked. That question settled heavily between us. Because the truth was, we had already made it. Not in one moment, but in all the small ones that led here. The looks we didn't break. The touches we didn't stop. The words we didn't say out loud until it was too late. I stepped closer. Not all the way. Just enough to feel the shift again, the same one from before, but stronger now. Less hesitation. Less denial. This is the last chance, I said quietly. If we walk away now, we can still pretend none of this happened. He studied me carefully. And if we don't? I held his gaze. Then we don't get to pretend anymore. For a second, I thought he might step back. That he might be the one to stop it. But he didn't. And neither did I. The distance between us disappeared slowly, like something unfolding exactly the way it was meant to. There was no rush. No urgency. Just inevitability. When he finally touched me again, it wasn't uncertain like before. It was deliberate, steady, like he had already accepted the consequences. My breath caught, but I didn't pull away. Because at that moment, everything else faded. The rules. The boundaries. Even Daniel. All of it became distant, like something that belonged to another version of me. You can still stop, Luca said softly, though his hand didn't move away. I shook my head. No, I whispered. And that was it. Not a dramatic decision. Not a moment of chaos. Just a quiet surrender to something I had been resisting for far too long. Later, I would try to pinpoint the exact second everything crossed the line. But the truth was, there wasn't just one. It had been happening all along. And as I stood there, closer to him than I had ever allowed myself to be, I understood something that made it even harder to turn back. This wasn't just about desire anymore. It was about something deeper. Something far more dangerous. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. And I wasn't sure I wanted to give that up. The first time it happened, it didn't feel like something reckless. It felt quiet. Controlled. Almost careful. There was no urgency, no chaos like I might have imagined. Instead, it unfolded slowly, like both of us were aware of how fragile the moment was and how easily it could break everything beyond repair. Afterward, the silence was heavier than anything before. I sat at the edge of the bed, my hands resting in my lap, trying to steady my breathing. The room felt unfamiliar, even though nothing in it had changed. Luca stood by the window, looking out but not really seeing anything. Neither of us spoke. Because what could we say? There are moments in life where words don't clarify anything, they only make things more real. And this was one of them. I didn't think it would feel like this, I said finally. He turned slightly. Like what? I hesitated. Not just physical. That was the closest I could get to explaining it. Because it wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what it meant. The shift. The line we had crossed, not just once, but completely. Luca didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter than I expected. It was never just that. I looked at him then. And for the first time, I saw something I hadn't fully allowed myself to notice before. This wasn't one-sided. This wasn't just impulse or curiosity. He felt it too. That realization made everything heavier. More complicated. More dangerous. We can't keep doing this, I said, even though part of me already knew that wasn't true. He stepped closer again, but slower this time, more deliberate. Then why are you still here? He asked. I didn't have an answer. Because leaving would have been the right thing. Simple. Clear. Final. But I didn't move. That afternoon blurred into evening. We tried to act normal, sat in separate rooms, avoided each other's eyes, pretended the house hadn't changed. But everything had. Every sound felt sharper. Every movement more intentional. And every moment apart only made the pull stronger. By nightfall, the distance between us felt unbearable again. I found him in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, staring down at nothing. You regret it? He asked without looking up. The question caught me off guard. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I should, I said honestly. That made him look at me. But you don't, he finished. I shook my head slowly. No. The truth settled between us, undeniable. And once again, we didn't step away. Because regret wasn't enough to stop it. Not when something else had already taken hold. Something stronger. Something that made everything else feel distant, even consequences. That night was different. Not because of what we did, but because of what we didn't say. No promises. No explanations. No attempts to justify anything. Just an unspoken understanding that whatever this was, it wasn't temporary anymore. And somewhere deep down, that realization should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like I was stepping further into something I couldn't fully see, but didn't want to escape. And as I lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, one thought kept returning, sharper each time. This wasn't just a mistake. It was becoming a reality. And I had no idea how it was going to end. The second day felt heavier. Not because anything new had happened, but because everything had already happened. There's a strange shift that occurs once a boundary is crossed. The tension changes. The uncertainty disappears. What's left behind isn't hesitation, it's consequence waiting quietly in the background. I woke up early. For a moment, I forgot. The room was still, the morning light soft and indifferent. It could have been any other day, any other version of my life. Then I heard movement in the hallway. And everything came rushing back. I stayed in bed longer than necessary, staring at the ceiling, trying to gather something: clarity, guilt, regret, anything that would ground me. But all I felt was awareness. Of what I had done. Of what I was still doing. And of how easily I had stepped into it. When I finally got up, I found Luca in the kitchen again. Same place as the night before. Same quiet stillness. You didn't sleep, he said without turning. Neither did you. He nodded slightly. That was the thing about this now, we didn't need to explain anything. The silence between us had become its own language. We should talk, I said. He turned this time. About what? About what happens next? The question hung there, heavier than anything we had said before. Because until now, we hadn't needed to think about next. Everything had existed in the moment. Now, there was something else. Reality catching up. Daniel coming back. Life resuming. We stop, I said, more firmly than I felt. When he comes back, this ends. Luca watched me carefully, like he was trying to see past the words. And can you do that? He asked. Yes, I answered, too quickly. He didn't call it out. But I felt it anyway, the doubt. Not from him. From myself. We don't have a choice, I added. That's not true, he said quietly. We always have a choice. I looked away. Because that was the problem. We did. And I had already proven what I was capable of choosing. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended state. We kept distance again. More than before. Not out of discipline, but because something had shifted internally. The intensity wasn't gone. It had just settled deeper. More controlled. More dangerous. By evening, the air felt almost calm. Like the storm had already passed. We sat in the living room, separate ends of the couch, a quiet space between us that felt intentional this time. This is it, I said. Tomorrow everything goes back. He nodded. No argument. No hesitation. Just acceptance. And yet, when our eyes met, there was something unspoken there. Not longing. Not even regret. Something else. Something unresolved. Do you think he knows? Luca asked suddenly. The question hit me harder than I expected. No, I said immediately. But even as I said it, something tightened in my chest. Because Daniel had always been observant, careful, and lately, distant in a way I hadn't questioned enough. He trusts you, Luca said. I know. And you're sure that's all it is? I didn't answer. Because for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that hadn't before. What if this wasn't as hidden as I believed? What if the only person still pretending everything was normal was me? That night, I barely slept again. But this time, it wasn't because of Luca. It was because of Daniel. And the quiet, unsettling realization that maybe I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. And the quiet, unsettling realization that maybe I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. The thought stayed with me long after the house fell silent. It didn't make sense at first. Daniel had always been predictable in the best way, consistent, attentive, grounded. He wasn't the type to hide things. But then again, neither was I. Or at least, I hadn't been. Morning came too quickly. I heard Luca moving around before I opened my eyes. Drawers, footsteps, the low hum of routine. Everything felt deliberate again, controlled, like we were both preparing to step back into roles we had temporarily abandoned. Daniel would be home in a few hours. That fact sat heavily in my chest. When I finally got up, the house already looked different. Cleaner. More organized. As if we were trying to erase any trace of what had happened, not just physically, but psychologically. Undoing something that couldn't actually be undone. You packed? I asked, leaning against the doorway. Luca nodded. His bag sat near the entrance. You're leaving today? Before he gets back. There was something final in the way he said it. No hesitation. No ambiguity. Just an understanding that whatever this was, it couldn't coexist with Daniel in the same space. That's probably best, I said, though the words felt heavier than I expected. He looked at me then. Not intensely. Not emotionally. Just directly. Is it? He asked. I didn't respond right away. Because best depended on what you were trying to protect. And I wasn't entirely sure anymore. We didn't say much after that. There was no dramatic goodbye. No attempt to define what had happened between us. Just small, practical movements, him adjusting his bag, me standing there like I was waiting for something I couldn't name. At the door, he paused. This doesn't just disappear, he said. I know. And you can pretend it does. I held his gaze. But you won't, I finished. A faint, almost imperceptible smile crossed his face. No, he said. Then he left. Just like that. No closure. No resolution. Only silence filling the space he had occupied. I stood there for a long time after the door closed, trying to feel something clear. Regret. Relief. Anything definitive. But all I felt was unsettled. Like something had been interrupted rather than ended. Daniel came home that afternoon. Everything about him was exactly the same. The way he walked in. The way he set his keys down. The way he looked at me. Hey, he said, smiling. Hey, I replied, matching it. Normal. Perfectly normal. We talked about his trip. Work. Small things. Familiar rhythms. If there was tension, he didn't show it. And for a while, I started to believe maybe I had imagined everything. That maybe it was possible to compartmentalize it all, lock it away somewhere unreachable. Until dinner. We sat across from each other, quiet between conversations. Then, casually, too casually, he said. Luca left early. My fork paused midair. Yes, I said carefully. He had things to do. Daniel nodded. I figured. There was something in his tone. Not accusatory. Not suspicious. Just knowing. I forced myself to stay calm. You talked to him? Briefly, he said. I swallowed. And? He looked at me then. Really looked. Longer than usual. Then he smiled slightly. He said the visit was interesting. My chest tightened. What does that mean? Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me in a way that felt unfamiliar. It means, he said slowly, that people tend to reveal more about themselves than they realize. The room felt colder. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like a conversation. It felt like something else. Something closer to a test. And for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't sure if I was the only one who knew the truth. I wasn't sure if I was the only one who knew the truth. Dinner ended quietly after that. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just thinner. Like the air between us had lost something essential, even if neither of us said it out loud. Daniel carried his plate to the sink, rinsed it with the same calm precision he always had. Nothing in his movements suggested suspicion. Nothing suggested anger. And yet, everything felt different. "You seem tired," he said, glancing at me over his shoulder. "I didn't sleep well," I replied. "That happens." Simple. Neutral. Unreadable. I watched him for a moment, searching for something, a crack, a shift, anything that would confirm what I was beginning to suspect. But Daniel had always been controlled. If he knew something, he wouldn't show it easily. Later that night, we sat in the living room together. The TV played quietly in the background, neither of us paying attention. "You missed him?" Daniel asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Luca?" I said. He nodded. I forced a small shrug. It was just a visit. Right. He didn't push. But the question lingered in the air long after he asked it. Eventually, he stood up. "I have something to show you," he said. A subtle tension ran through me. "What is it?" "Just come." I followed him down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. We stopped at his office. A room I rarely entered. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting me go in first. "Sit," he said. I hesitated but did as he asked. He moved his desk, opened a drawer, and took out something small. A phone. Not his. My chest tightened immediately. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." "That's interesting," he said, almost casually. "Because it's yours." The words didn't come out harsh. They came out quietly. Controlled. And that made them worse. I stared at the phone. My phone. The one I had been using privately, the one I thought I had hidden carefully enough. "You left it in the guest room," Daniel continued. "Yesterday." My mind raced. I didn't remember that. Or maybe I did, and just hadn't realized the mistake. "I didn't go through everything," he added. "Not at first." My throat felt dry. "But you did," I said. It wasn't a question. "No," he replied. "Not immediately." That word again. Immediately. Meaning eventually. "I wasn't looking for anything," he said. "But when something doesn't make sense, I tend to follow it." I couldn't speak. Because now, everything made sense. The questions. The tone. The calmness. He had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. "And here's the part one can't figure out," Daniel said, stepping closer. "You're careful. You always have been." His eyes met mine. "So why did you make such a simple mistake?" I opened my mouth. But nothing came out. Because the truth was, I hadn't been careful. Not really. I had just believed I wouldn't get caught. And now, sitting there, with the evidence literally in his hands, that illusion had completely collapsed. "You can explain," he said. Still calm. Still measured. And somehow, that made it even more terrifying. Because this wasn't anger. Not yet. This was something else. Something far more controlled. And I had no idea which was worse. What he already knew. Or what he was waiting for me to say next. Or what he was waiting for me to say next. The silence stretched longer than anything we had shared before. I could feel it pressing in from all sides, tight, suffocating, unavoidable. Daniel didn't rush me. That was the most unsettling part. He just stood there, watching, giving me space that didn't feel like freedom, it felt like pressure. "I didn't plan it," I said finally. The words sounded weak the moment they left me. He didn't react. "Not at first," I added. Still nothing. His expression remained composed, almost analytical, like he was listening not just to what I said, but how I said it. "That's usually how it starts," he replied. No anger. No raised voice. Just acknowledgement. "It shouldn't have happened," I continued, my voice steadier now. "I know that." "I'm sure you do." Something in that response cut deeper than anger would have. Because it wasn't disbelief. It was distance. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, I realized something I had completely missed before. Daniel wasn't shocked. He wasn't even surprised. He had expected this. Or something like it. How long, he asked. The question landed cleanly. No hesitation. No softness. I hesitated anyway. A few days, I said. It sounded smaller than it was. Contained. Manageable. But we both knew it wasn't just about time. It was about crossing something that couldn't be uncrossed. With him, Daniel clarified. Or before him? My heart skipped. Before him. I repeated. He held my gaze. Yes. And in that moment, the ground shifted again. Because that question didn't come from suspicion. It came from certainty. No, I said firmly. There was no one before him. He watched me closely, evaluating. Then, slowly, he nodded. I believe you. Relief should have followed. It didn't. Because belief wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even understanding. It was just acknowledgement of a fact. And now, he asked. I frowned slightly. Now what? Now that it's happened, he said. What do you think this is? The question felt different. Less about him. More about me. I swallowed. I don't know. That's not true. He stepped closer. You felt something, he continued. Otherwise, this doesn't happen. My chest tightened. Because he was right. And denying it now would only make everything worse. It wasn't just physical, I admitted. There it was again. That truth. The same one I had struggled with before. Daniel didn't flinch. But something in his posture shifted, subtle, almost invisible. Of course it wasn't, he said quietly. The room felt smaller. More contained. Like everything was narrowing down to something inevitable. And him? Daniel asked. What did he feel? I hesitated. Because that answer mattered more than I wanted it to. He knew what he was doing, I said carefully. Daniel nodded once. I'm sure he did. No anger. Still. Just control. But now, there was something else beneath it. Something sharper. And here's the part you still don't understand, Daniel added. I looked at him. What? He held my gaze steadily. I knew this might happen. The words didn't register at first. Then, they did. What? I said again, quieter this time. I know my brother, he continued. And I know you. My pulse quickened. You knew. Not exactly when, he said. Not exactly how. A pause. But the possibility was always there. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. That doesn't make any sense, I said. It does, he replied calmly. You just haven't put it together yet. The room felt unsteady. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about what I had done. It was about something bigger. Something I hadn't seen coming at all. And as I sat there, trying to understand, a new, far more unsettling thought began to form. What if this wasn't just a betrayal? What if, in some way, I had been allowed to make it? What if, in some way, I had been allowed to make it? The thought settled slowly, like something too heavy to drop all at once. That's not possible, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Daniel didn't argue. He simply walked past me, setting the phone down on the desk like it no longer mattered. You think control is about stopping things, he said. It's not. I turned toward him. Then what is it about? Understanding outcomes, he replied. Before they happen. A quiet pause. I didn't make you do anything, he added. But I knew who my brother was. And I knew what you've been missing. The last word hit harder than anything else. Missing. Because that was the truth I had been avoiding from the very beginning. You could have stopped it, I said. Yes. Then why didn't you? For the first time, something in his expression shifted. Not anger. Not pain. Something more complex. Because I needed to see if I was right, he said. About what? About whether what we have is real, he answered. The room went still. You tested me? I asked. No, he said calmly. I let reality test you. That distinction didn't make it better. If anything, it made it worse. You let your own brother. I didn't let him, Daniel interrupted, still controlled but firmer now. I understood that if there was something unresolved in you, it would surface eventually. I shook my head, trying to process it. That's not trust, I said. That's something else. It's clarity, he replied. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. And now you have it? I asked. He studied me. Yes. And what does it tell you? Another pause. That you're not who I thought you were, he said. The words landed cleanly. No dramatics. No raised voice. Just finality. I felt it then, not guilt, not even regret in the way I had expected. Something deeper. Loss. Not just of him, but of the version of myself I thought existed. And you? I asked quietly. Are you who I thought you were? That made him stop. Just for a second. I never pretended to be anything else, he said. Maybe that was true. Or maybe I had simply never looked closely enough. What happens now? I asked. Because that was the only question left. He exhaled slowly. We don't fix this, he said. This isn't something you repair. My chest tightened. So that's it? He met my eyes. That depends, he said. On what? On whether what you felt was real, he answered. Or just absence filling space. The question echoed. Because I didn't know. Not fully. Not in a way that felt certain anymore. Luca had made me feel alive. But Daniel had given me something stable. And somewhere between those two things, I had lost clarity. I don't know, I admitted. Daniel nodded slightly. I believe you. That hurt more than anything else. Because for the first time, there was no expectation left. No assumption. Just truth. Raw and unresolved. He moved toward the door, pausing briefly before leaving. I'll be gone for a few days, he said. You should think. The door closed behind him. And just like that, I was alone again. But this time, it didn't feel open. It felt empty. Because the choice I thought I had already made wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning of understanding what it had cost. And standing there, in the quiet aftermath of everything, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about identity. About what I chose when no one stopped me. And now, for the first time, I had to face what that choice said about me.